It's a sunny February afternoon in San Francisco, and I'm at the Union Square Plaza together with Dave Edwardson, the bass player of Neurosis. And we're here to discuss the metal and music climate in San Francisco, as well as what it's like to be a musician here in the area. Dave, you grew up in the Oakland, Berkeley area, and Neurosis formed around 1985. I was wondering, what was the music climate like in the area during the formation of the band?
I think it had kind of gone through a lot of changes at that point. Personally, I was more, and still am probably more into punk than metal, but I don't know, I started going to punk shows in 1981, and I just looked it up today. 1983 was my first metal show. It was Metallica with Raven at the Keystone Berkeley on the Kill 'Em All for One tour. I think the punk scene was actually starting to get a little bit stale. A lot of the punk bands started kind of becoming more metal influenced, which in most cases wasn't very good. Some of the newer bands that were metal influenced were good, but the old bands trying to add metal to their sound didn't work very well, I thought. Actually, when Neurosis started, we'd kind of been in a band that had gotten gradually more metal, and then started arguing about what direction to take the band. We were all high school kids back then, but we were called Violent Coercion, and we broke up over basically some stylistic differences, and our singer was leaving to go to college in a different town. The three founding members of Neurosis, who were in the other band, said, let's start a band that isn't so much based in any one style. Let's start our own thing and not have it be punk or metal or this or that. Let's just try to borrow elements from the music we love and be influenced by the originality and uniqueness of others, but try to make it sound like our own. I think at first we didn't, but I think we always kept that in mind and eventually grew to doing something very unique. And I think now, is uniquely us, and maybe influencing other people. It's definitely changed definitely the metal scene has changed a lot over the years. I think overall it's gotten a lot smarter.
How do you mean that it's getting smarter?
Well, the people are just smarter. It's a different class of people. I mean, maybe some really big shows, maybe really giant Slayer shows or Iron Maiden shows, you still get out some of the more old school, just headbangers. We're a different kind of people than today's metal fans. I don't know, they seem a lot more caveman, a lot more sexist, a lot more racist. They were certainly scarier, more violent. Not that all that wasn't kind of exciting to run around in and try to avoid getting beat up by people, or I was called a punk rock faggot all the time by metalheads because
Was there a rivalry between metalheads and punkheads?
There was, but there's a lot of camaraderie, but not 100% of the metalheads were like that, and definitely in high school, all the weirdos just hang out with each other, especially if they're all smoking pot or whatever like we were, going to the same parties and drinking. And yeah, a lot of the metalheads listen to punk, and most of the punks listen to some metal, and those guys always had your back at shows, but sometimes some of the older, scarier metalheads did not like the punk rock invasion of metal. But the more the thrash metal scene took over, and the people with the Quiet Riot shirts stopped showing up to the Exodus shows because they realized this isn't the same thing anymore. This is its own thing now. This is thrash metal. This is crossover. There's these guys might be running around trying to beat up punk rockers, but now people in the bands they're listening to are on stage wearing Dead Kennedy shirts, Black Flag shirts, or Misfit shirts. I think they realized that they had lost that battle.
So speaking of thrash metal, what was it like during the first wave of thrash metal? What was it like being a musician during that time?
Well, that was fun and exciting. Some friends of mine had a band in high school, and they needed a bass player, and I was kind of I was really good friends with them, and I was a noted bass player of some talent within the punk scene. So they immediately asked me to play with them. There was a band called Sacrilege BC. Doubt you would have heard of them. But they did 3 albums, and I left the band to start Neurosis right before they recorded their first album. And it wasn't on the demo either, but they were a lot of fun to play with, and they were good friends with like Death Angel and Possessed. So most of our shows were playing with one of those 2 bands, or maybe opening for someone a little bit bigger. First time the Accused played in town, I got to open for them. And yeah, like I said, the punk scene really was kind of getting stale. Like,
that turned you into like the metal scene.
Yeah, it gave me something else to do, and suddenly it was new and exciting, which is how punk was for a while, you know, with hardcore, which I was into in the early 80s. And then, you know, the old bands broke up, or they got big and started sucking, or they tried to go metal and it just ruined them. And new and exciting bands weren't coming around so much anymore. And there was this new thing, this whole thrash metal thing that was, you could tell it was new and exciting, and it was just happening. And that was a very fun thing to be a part of. I'm like, hey, this feels just like punk rock did to me. Lyrics aren't quite as political, and you still have to deal with some of those people chasing you around calling you a punk rock faggot or whatever, but it was...
But these pioneer thrash bands, as for instance Metallica and Exodus, did they have an influence on you as a musician?
Definitely, especially Metallica. Although I did see Exodus probably a good 20 or 30 times because they played all the time. But yeah, those first 4 Metallica records sure did a lot for me. It just sounded so exciting and raw and energetic and in your face, and pissed off in the same kind of way punk was. It just definitely grabbed me and changed the way I thought about stuff. And it definitely had a profound effect on Neurosis as well. We wanted to take the anger of punk, but just mix it with the power of metal.
Make some kind of unique sound to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that whole just heavy thing.
So during the emergence of thrash metal, and how into the scene were you? Did you have like a personal relationship with, for instance, the guys in Metallica, or just saw them at shows?
Yeah, they were older than me, so I didn't really hang out with them too much. I would say hi to them. I got invited to a after party at their house once. Kirk Hammett came and saw Neurosis a few times and was very friendly to me. I've met Lars a couple times over the years. Most recently backstage at a Mastodon show. Those guys are friends of mine. But yeah, they were older guys than me, and they lived in El Cerrito. And I dare say they didn't quite hang out as much. Exodus guys I knew a little better, but not that much better. Some of the other guys in the band Sacrilege seem to know those guys, but they were also kind of not exactly from our area. Possessed were good friends. They went to a different high school than I did, but some of the guys in the band Sacrilege went to the same school as them. So we'd see those guys around all the time. And yeah, I think during probably 84, 85, I was probably going to more metal shows than punk shows, just because there was more of that going on. Shows were better. There was a club called Ruthie's Inn in Berkeley that pretty much everything happened at. Some of the bigger shows would be in San Francisco at the place called The Stone. That's where I saw Celtic Frost at. And that's where Slayer started playing after they got big, but I saw Slayer at Ruthie's Inn a good 6 or 7 times.
Going back to the early years, San Francisco is often associated as a music town. When did you personally discover?
I'm sorry.
When did you personally discover the music scene in San Francisco and Berkeley?
1981 was my first punk show. I went to a small club in Berkeley called the Berkeley Square. Just wanted to see anybody. I read about a band called the Red Rockers that were playing that were supposed to sound like the Clash. So I said, okay, I'll check these guys out. Went and saw them. Then maybe a month and a half later, Dead Kennedys were playing in San Francisco, and I was very excited for that one. So I got my dad to give me a ride there. I just turned 13, I think. Yeah. It was on a Friday night at a place they were calling the Elite Club, but it's actually the Fillmore now. And it was the Fillmore in the 60s, but it was run down and kind of unused, and I think some people found out that you could rent it just for the night or something. But it was pretty shabby and destitute, but a nice big place for big punk shows. That was a very wild show. It was a pretty big-sized place, and half the place was slam dancing. There was like 6 or 8 different pits on the ground, and it was a very exciting moment for me. I said, this is something I'm very interested in.
I want to be a part of this.
Yeah, and that next year I got a bass for my birthday, and the rest is history. Here I am now, 45 years old, talking about punk and metal.
But in terms of you just talked about a live show. When it comes to live music venues, how do you think that, if you were compare the live scene in the 80s to now, is there a difference that you've paid attention to?
There's been a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of years where venues were hard to come by. There weren't many places doing stuff. There were definitely some pretty bad years in there, and then there were some great years where, there was a big club called the On Broadway in San Francisco that did good amount of metal and a lot of punk. And when that place went away, it really left a hole in the scene. But then later on, the Farm opened, and it was a new giant place that did shows. That was run by, I'm not sure, they were kind of anarchists. They had a farm there, and it was like an alternative school for children where they work with the animals. I'm not sure. They were not really hippies. They were bohemians, but they started letting people do punk shows there, and boy, that was a great big place. That was a little bit empty the first few shows they had there, and then once word got around, I don't know, more and more people just started coming out, and then it was like, hey, big shows are back. This new heyday, and all sorts of bands from out of town started coming and really revived the punk scene. And it's been the same way with metal bands and places to play. And right now is a good time. The Oakland Metro is a place that's been getting more and more shows, and it's a good size, and the owners are very accommodating, very into the scene themselves. They've really helped grow a new scene. We're very lucky with that. San Francisco, currently there aren't so many venues. It's mostly over in the East Bay. And also San Francisco is just getting really expensive. A lot of people are moving from San Francisco to Oakland because it's, I think, the most expensive city to live in America. It's actually more expensive than New York.
Yeah, so I've heard as well.
Yeah. So, unless you got a really good job or have 20 roommates in a small place, it's hard to be able to afford to live over here. And then clubs are just, big techno discos because they can make more money. There's still a few good places that do shows. DNA Lounge does some good stuff. There's some real underground stuff going on here, but as far as a big place Cannibal Corpse is coming to town, I guess they're still slims, but they're doing less metal these days. Everything's going to the Metro now. It's the place. They've been very good to the punk and metal scene.
Okay. So basically, there's a more live music scene in Oakland at this moment, you would say?
Definitely. There's even if the musicians come from San Francisco, they're mostly playing in Oakland. Definitely. There's between that and some other venues, it's more it's all happening in Oakland.
So when it comes to, well, there's a lot of bands arising from this area, San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland. Why do you think that this area has been like a pillar stone in terms of metal?
I don't know. It sure was a good place to come from, though. It just seemed normal to me that this is what's going on because it was something that I was interested in and just totally lucky to be part of it. I can't imagine what it would be like living somewhere else and really having to struggle to find stuff. I mean, we had great record stores growing up around here where you could just go see, a brand new record that just came out of England that you'd never find somewhere else. Just take a chance and buy it, or you've heard from friends that this is good. It was just, there's always been so much support and availability of things here. And the Bay Area's got a real, liberal, hippie, protest kind of history, so I think it probably comes a lot from that, or from kids being the children of hippies who were probably more permissive and said, oh, the kid wants to start a band, okay, well, let's buy him an amp and let him practice in the garage. I mean, when I was a kid, no one had money for a practice room. We didn't have jobs. There was, 2 or 3 different parents' houses, different bands I was in. We all just practiced at someone's house. So I think there's more parents that are supportive of their kids and their artistic endeavors in this area than there are elsewhere.
But that probably had something to do with it.
Yeah, I think definitely did. Definitely noticed parents are much more permissive here and supportive. My parents certainly were. A lot of band practices in my parents' basement.
So what trends in metal are you noticing today? Or the last couple of years? Is there like a specific subgenre that you feel is dominating?
Oh boy. Well, there's dominating my ears and then dominating the scene. There's 2 different things, but it seems like everything's happening all at once now. And there's like the big thrash revival thing going on. A lot of grindcore bands out there these days you go and see, and I don't even know whether most of those bands are more punk or metal, but there's a lot of crazy grindcore stuff, and of course so much good black metal going on these days. I'm definitely loving a lot of that. I don't even know what you call the more experimental stuff. A lot of times it's technical stuff, like the new Gorguts record and Portal from Australia. I'm really liking some of the strange, dissonant type stuff like that. But I mean, there's young kids doing classic power metal and stuff. Sound like Iron Maiden or something. Just seems like now is the time for everything. And it seems like, in a way, that used to happen more in punk and now doesn't so much. So the scenes all kind of mix. Like a band could sound like that. So, you go see a metal show and you can get like a power metal band, a doom band, a black metal band, and like a crazy grindcore band, and maybe like, a classic style like thrash band all in the same bill, and it doesn't seem odd. Whereas punk definitely seems to have splintered into more subgenres. So, no, this is, an emo show, or this is, there's so many different splits of punk. I don't know.
But you think that the metal scene, at least, it seems to be the different subgenres seems to be a bit more integrated than segregated?
Yeah, I think they're pretty integrated. I mean, sometimes maybe on a bigger tour, it makes more sense to. There's a very low airplane there. Wow. Yeah, except on bigger tours where I think they're worried about getting enough people into the show and they try to just get everybody from the one genre out to a really big place. I think the more underground shows are definitely full of variety. I mean, it seems like a lot of people like myself are in multiple bands and all the bands sound different, so, you know, Impaled and Ghoul don't sound very similar, but it's quite a few of the same people in both those bands. So everybody's got different tastes, and I think it works to just have that reflected in shows where all the bands sound different than each other, which also keeps it more interesting.
So in the 80s, it seems like you went to a lot of concerts and gigs. Do you still do that to this day?
Yeah, maybe not as many as I went to 4 or 5 years ago, but I probably go to 4 or 5 shows a month. Definitely used to be 8 to 10.
Lastly, do you have any tips on local San Francisco, Oakland bands that you think that we should pay attention to, that you think have a bright future ahead of them?
2 bands I think that are probably unknown to people in Sweden, and they're actually good friends of mine, and they're another one of those bands where 3/4 of the people are in both bands. Dimesland, who play very aggressive, crazy, complicated, but it's complicated to make it sound more crazy and not technical, but just to make it sound more messed up and weird, kind of like Portal or Gorguts or something. And then most of the same people also have a band called Wild Hunt, and they're more like somewhat melodic black metal without really the blast beat parts, but just kind of the epic parts. Maybe more like along the lines of like the newer Enslaved type stuff. And both the bands are just super excellent. If you can track anything down by either of those guys, they both are recording new albums right now. I don't know who's going to put either of them out. You might be shopping for labels right now, but those are 2 bands I'd highly recommend.
Okay, so thank you, Dave, for taking the time to speak with me here at Union Square Plaza.
It's been a good talk.